So this took place several years ago. So the place I was working at had several different departments, and we needed to move into a larger space. So the majority, pretty much all those departments, moved to a new location, and this one particular department stayed at this old location. Well, all I remember was that I was working as a delivery driver for this particular company, by the way. And I'm not going to name this company because it's a very large, reputable company that's still in business. It's a very large company that the majority of people across Canada and the US have heard of. I'm not going to state the name of the company, but anyways, I was a delivery driver for this particular company at the time. All I remember was I got back on a Friday afternoon after completing my route. My boss just said to me in a hushed tone that there's been an incident at the other plant. If the media approaches you, just say no comment. And I was thinking like, okay, and I was kind of baffled as to what he was talking about. I didn't know why would the media be approaching me. So he handed me this notice that was from the president of our company. And it stated in this notice, this was written by the president of the company, at that time anyways, that I've been informed of an incident that took place at the other plant. That incident was a confrontation between two workers that resulted in the death of one of those individuals. I just remember standing there. I must have read that notice about 25, 30 times in a row, just in utter disbelief that there was a murder at my in my company, in my workplace. And it was obvious that my boss, he was quite upset about it. Even though he was indoors, inside a facility that had no windows and just had fluorescent lighting, he was wearing sunglasses at the time, so he might have been crying or whatever. But it was evident that he was very upset and he didn't want to talk about it. So I saw some other co-workers and I asked them, so who was it? Who did it involve? And they told me, who did the stabbing. And I said, no, really, who did it? And he repeated again, so-and-so did it. Then I was in disbelief because this is a guy that I knew quite well at that company. I got along with him quite well as well too. The guy that did the stabbing. Yeah, apparently the one worker, he stabbed the other worker to death. Stabbed him 11 times. I've never been able to find out what the motivation was. I've heard that the two of them were related to each other, were cousins, that it could have been a family thing, or heard from other people it could have been a drug thing. And from what I heard, the victim, the one that was stabbed to death, I heard that he confronted the stabber with a 2x4 or a stick of some sort. So that guy ended up stabbing him 11 times and he ended up dying. So the person that did the stabbing, he was charged with second-degree murder. Now in Canada, if you're convicted for second degree murder, it's an automatic life sentence with no chance of parole for at least 10 years. So the minimum that you're going to have to serve in jail before you can even apply for parole, if you could get convicted of second-degree murder, is 10 years in jail. A judge can increase that amount to make it that you have to serve longer than 10 years in jail before you can apply for parole. And I think the maximum that a judge can set that sentence at, a judge can set it as high as 25 years in jail before being allowed to apply for parole. And you could end up spending the rest of your life in jail if convicted of second-degree murder. So anyways, I ran into some people, a person on one of my delivery routes, maybe a couple or a few months after this stabbing occurred. And this guy, I guess, knew the stabber, and he told me that this guy only ended up getting 2 years in jail. He only ended up having to serve 2 years in jail. Now, my guess is that he probably struck some kind of a plea bargain deal and probably pled guilty to a lesser charge of manslaughter. And with manslaughter in Canada, I believe the maximum sentence for manslaughter in Canada is also life in jail. But unlike second-degree murder and first-degree murder, there's no minimum sentence for manslaughter. So that must have been the reason why he was allowed to only serve 2 years in jail. And it was apparent that the stabber, from what I heard, it sounded apparent to me that he had some kind of an anger management problem. Because from what I heard, that wasn't his first offense. I heard that one day he got into a roadside dispute on Highway 401, which is not only the busiest highway crossing Toronto, but the busiest highway in Canada. It's in fact the busiest highway in North America. Anyways, I heard that someone cut him off one day while he was driving on the 401 through Toronto, and that he signaled to this driver to pull over, and he took a tire iron or crowbar, some kind of dangerous heavy metal object, hit this driver in the chest and stomach, and ended up breaking this driver's ribs. And at the time that he did this, that he assaulted this driver, he was brand new to Canada. I think it was just his first week in Canada. And after he did that to that driver, he said, that's what we do to drivers that cut people off back in my home country. So I don't know why he managed to stay in Canada, why he did not get deported. And the funny thing, another thing too with this particular guy, even though the stabber was someone I did get along with, and I knew him, and, we had some good conversations. I had no problems with him. The thing I was hearing was that one of my customers was asking me to do something. Like he put in an order, and he wanted me to do something that involved the stabber doing something at our company for this customer because of the position he was in. That's the best way to put it. Because of the position he was in. Like it would have been involved him doing this customer a favor. And I remember this customer telling me that the stabber had mentioned that I was a crybaby, that I complained too much and all that to this customer. And I was quite pissed off when I heard that. And I was ready to go back and confront the stabber about that and have it out with him. I think I did actually confront the stabber, but I didn't come at him in a confrontational or argumentative way. I just said, oh, this customer said that you said I was a crybaby. And he actually told me that, no, that's not the case. The customer was lying, which was entirely possible. So in hindsight, I'm glad that I approached the stabber in a civilized manner and didn't approach him in an aggressive manner, because who knows? Who knows what would have happened to me? So I guess the moral of the story, I mean, I worked with this guy, the stabber, who ended up killing someone. And I had a previous story time, also on my channel, about this one guy who was once an Al-Qaeda terrorist, or at the very least an alleged Al-Qaeda terrorist. So I mean, I know a killer, and I know a terrorist. I guess the moral of the story is you never know who you're dealing with, who you're working with, who your neighbors are. So I guess just be careful. Pick your fights and pick your arguments wisely, because you never know who you're dealing with.